making up with the age of AI and our human future. With the chapter called Global Network Platforms. But let me do a little seashell rattling because I love the beach and I'm always there. These are some shells I picked up in Cape May, New Jersey. At other places, I don't usually find shells this big. Okay, global network platforms. The shift from atlases to online navigation services has proved so convenient that few have paused to consider what a revolutionary change has occurred or what its consequences might be. The individual and society have gained convenience by entering into a new relationship with the network platform and its operator, accessing and becoming part of an evolving data set, including tracking of the individual's location at least while the application is in use, and trusting the network platform and its algorithms to produce accurate results. In a sense, the individual using such a service is not driving alone. Instead, he or she is part of a system in which human and machine intelligence are collaborating to guide an aggregation of people through their individual routes. The prevalence of this type of constant AI companion is likely to increase as sectors including healthcare, logistics, retail, finance, communications, media, transportation, and entertainment produce comparable advances, often enabled by network platforms. Our experience of day-to-day reality is being transformed. When users turn to AI-enabled network platforms for assistance with tasks, they are benefiting from a type of gathering and distilling of information that no prior generation has experienced. Such platforms' scale, power, and ability to pursue novel patterns provides individual users with unprecedented conveniences and capabilities. At the same time, these users are entering into a form of human-machine dialogue that has never before existed. AI-enabled network platforms have the capacity to shape human activity in ways that may not clearly be understood or are even clearly definable or expressible by the human user. This raises essential questions. With what objective function is such AI operating? And by whose design and within what regulatory parameters? The answers to these and similar questions will continue to shape lives and societies in the future. Who operates and defines the limits on these processes? What impact might they have on social norms and institutions? And who, if anyone, has access to what AI perceives? If no human can ever fully understand or view the data at an individualized level, or access all the steps involved in the process, that is, if the human role remains confined to designing, monitoring, and setting general parameters for AI, should such limitations be comforting, unnerving, or both? Companies and nations. Designers did not set out with the clear objective of inventing AI-enabled network platforms. Instead, they arose incidentally as a function of the problems that individual companies, engineers, and their customers sought to solve. Network platform operators developed their technology to fulfill certain human needs. They connected buyers and sellers, inquirers and information providers, and groups of individuals sharing common interests or goals. They deployed AI to improve or increasingly to enable their services and to augment their ability sometimes governments' expectations. As network platforms have grown and evolved, some have incidentally come to affect activities and sectors of society well beyond their original focus. And as previously noted, individuals have come to trust certain AI-driven network platforms with information that they would hesitate to show to a friend or the government, such as comprehensive records of where they have gone, what they did, and with whom, and what they searched for and viewed. The dynamic enabled by access to such personal data puts network platforms, their operators, and the AI they employ in newfound positions of social and political influence. Particularly during a pandemic-influenced era of social distancing and remote work, societies have come to rely on some AI-enabled network platforms as a kind of essential resource and social glue, a facilitator of expression, commerce, food delivery, and transportation. These changes have unfolded at a scale and speed that thus far have outpaced a broader understanding and consensus about the roles of these network platforms in society and on the international stage. As the recent role of social media in conveying and moderating political information and disinformation has demonstrated, some network platforms have assumed functions so significant as to potentially influence the conduct of national governance. This influence has arisen in effect by accident, without necessarily being sought out or properly prepared for. Yet the skills, instincts, and conceptual insights that produce excellence in the world of technology do not inevitably coincide with those of the world of government. Each sphere has its own language, organizational structures, animating principles, and core values. A network platform operating according to its standard commercial objectives and the demands of its users may in effect be transcending into the realm of governance and national strategy. In turn, traditional governments may struggle to discern the platform's motives and tactics even as they seek to adjust them to national and global objectives. The fact that AI operates according to its own processes, which are different from and often faster than human mental processes, adds another complexity. AI develops its own approaches for fulfilling whatever objective functions were specified. It produces outcomes and answers that are not characteristically human and that are largely independent of national or corporate cultures. The global nature of the digital world and AI's ability to monitor, block, tailor, produce, and distribute information on network platforms worldwide imports these complexities to the information space of disparate societies. As increasingly sophisticated AI is used to enable network platforms, it shapes social and commercial arrangements on a national and global scale. While social media platforms and their AI generally present themselves as content agnostic, not only their community standards but also their filtering and presentation of information can influence the way that information is created, aggregated, and perceived. As AI operates to recommend content and connections, categorize information and concepts, and predict user preferences and goals, it may inadvertently reinforce particular individual, group, or societal choices. In effect, it may encourage the distribution of certain types of information and the formation of certain types of connections while discouraging others. This dynamic potentially affects social and political outcomes regardless of the platform operator's intentions. Each day, individual users and groups influence one another rapidly and at vast scales across countless interactions, particularly when shaped by complex AI-driven recommendations. As a result, operators may not have a clear understanding of what is occurring in real time, and the complexities are magnified if the operator injects, wittingly or unwittingly, their own values or purposes. Recognizing these challenges, governmental attempts to address these dynamics will need to proceed with great care. Any governmental approach to this process, whether to restrict, control, or permit it, necessarily reflects choices and value judgments. If a government encourages platforms to label or block certain content, or if it requires AI to identify and downgrade biased or false information, such decisions may effectively operate as engines of social policy with unique breadth and influence. Across the world, the way to address these choices has become the subject of searching debates, particularly in technologically advanced free societies. Any approach is guaranteed to play out on a scale that is vastly greater than nearly any past legal or policy decision, with potentially instantaneous effects on the daily lives of millions or billions of users in many governmental jurisdictions. The intersection between network, platform, and governmental arenas will produce unpredictable and, in some cases, highly contested results. Rather than clear outcomes, however, we are more likely to arrive at a series of dilemmas with imperfect answers. Will attempts to regulate network platforms and their AIs function in alignment with various nations' political and social goals? Example, reducing crime, combating bias, and ultimately produce more just societies? Or will they lead to more powerful and intrusive governments that shape outcomes through a machine proxy, the logic of which is ineffable, and the conclusions of which become unavoidable? In iterative exchanges taking place over time across continents and between supranational user bases, will AI-driven network platforms advance a shared human culture and quest for answers beyond any national culture or value system? Or will AI-enabled global network platforms amplify specific lessons or patterns divined from users, producing effects that differ from or even undermine those their human developers planned or anticipated? We cannot avoid answering these questions because our communications, as now constructed, can no longer operate without AI-assisted networks. Network platforms and disinformation. National borders have long been permeable to new ideas and trends, including those fostered with a deliberately malign purpose, but never at such scale. While there is broad consensus regarding the importance of preventing intentionally distributed malign disinformation from driving social trends and political events, ensuring this outcome has rarely proved to be a precise or entirely successful undertaking. Moving forward, however, both offense and defense, both the spread of disinformation and efforts to combat it, will become increasingly automated and entrusted to AI. The language generating AI, GPT-3, has demonstrated the ability to create synthetic personalities For such a vast and arduous task, they would have to turn, as they already do, to content moderation AI algorithms. But who creates and monitors these, and how? When a free society relies on AI-enabled network platforms that generate, transmit, and filter content across national and regional borders, and when those platforms proceed in a manner that inadvertently promotes hate and division, that society faces a novel threat that should prompt it to consider novel approaches to policing its information environment. The underlying problem is urgent, yet AI-reliant solutions produce their own critical questions. We must not forego consideration of the proper balance between human judgment and AI-driven automation on both sides of the equation. For societies accustomed to the free exchange of ideas, grappling with AI's role in assessing and potentially censoring information has introduced difficult, fundamental debates. As the tools for spreading disinformation become more powerful and increasingly automated, the process of defining and suppressing disinformation increasingly appears as an essential social and political function. For private corporations and democratic governments, this role brings not only an unusual but also a frequently unsought degree of influence and responsibility over shifts in social and cultural phenomena. Developments that previously had not been operated or controlled by any single actor but had developed across millions of individual interactions in the physical world. For some, the inclination will be to entrust the task to a technical process that seems free from human bias and partiality, an AI with an objective function to identify and arrest the flow of disinformation and falsity. But what of the content that is never viewed by the public? When the prominence or diffusion of a message is so curtailed that its existence is in effect negated, we have reached a state of censorship. If anti-disinformation AI makes a mistake, suppressing content that is not malign disinformation but in fact authentic, how do we identify it? Can we know enough and in time to correct it? Alternatively, do we have the right to read or even a legitimate interest in reading AI-generated false information? The power to train defensive AI against an objective or subjective standard of falsehood, and the ability, if any, can be developed to monitor that AI's operations, would in itself become a function of importance and influence, rivaling the roles traditionally held by government. Small differences in the design of an AI's objective function, training parameters, and definitions of falsehood could lead to society altering differences in outcome. These questions become all the more vital as network platforms use AI to provide their services to billions of people. The international political and regulatory debates over TikTok, an AI-enabled network platform for the creation and sharing of short, often whimsical videos, offers an unexpected early glimpse of the challenges that can arise based on their previous use of the platform. Developed in China and having become popular globally, TikTok neither creates content nor appears to set extensive restrictions on it, beyond a time limit on videos and community guidelines that prohibit misinformation, violent extremism, and certain types of graphic content. To the general viewer, the primary attribute of TikTok's AI-assisted lens on the world appears to be whimsicality. Its content consists primarily of silly short video snippets of dances, jokes, and unusual skills. Yet, because of government concerns about the application's collection of user data and its perceived latent capacity for censorship and disinformation, both the Indian and American governments moved to restrict TikTok's use in 2020. Further, Washington moved to force the sale of TikTok's U.S. operations to a U.S.-based company that could hold user data domestically, preventing it from being exported to China. In turn, Beijing acted to prohibit the exportation of the code that supported the content recommendation algorithm at the heart of TikTok's efficacy and user appeal. I'm going to stop here for now. Thank you for watching and listening. May you find lasting happiness. I'll catch you in the